The sound of a gunshot echoed through the vast expanse of the Montana wilderness, shattering the peaceful dawn that had settled over the land. Yates Galloway's horse reared in panic as the bullet tore through his thigh, sending him tumbling to the hard, packed dirt of the trail. The year was 1878, and in this unforgiving territory, a man alone with a bullet wound had slim chances of survival. Blood soaked through his denim as Yates dragged himself to the shelter of a nearby rock formation. His pursuers, 3 men who'd followed him from the mining town of Silver Creek, were nowhere to be seen, but he knew they wouldn't be far behind. They believed he'd stolen gold from their claim, a false accusation that might now cost him his life. At 32, Yates had survived worse situations, but as he examined the wound, he knew this was bad. The bullet had lodged deep in his thigh, and each movement sent waves of agony through his body. His horse had bolted, taking his supplies with it. All he had was his revolver with 4 bullets remaining, a hunting knife, and the clothes on his back. Night fell quickly in the mountains, and with it came the bitter cold. Yates had managed to crawl nearly half a mile from where he'd been shot, following a small stream downhill. His leg had gone from screaming pain to a dangerous numbness. If infection set in, he'd be done for. As consciousness began to slip away, Yates thought he heard the sound of approaching hoofbeats. He reached for his gun, determined to take at least one of his pursuers with him if this was the end. "Hello, is someone there?" A woman's voice, clear as a bell, cut through his haze of pain. Yates struggled to focus as a slender figure dismounted from a dappled mare and approached cautiously. The woman held a lantern that illuminated her features' warm brown eyes, a determined jawline, and hair the color of wheat tied back in a practical braid. "Good Lord," she gasped when she saw him. "You're hurt bad. Keep riding," Yates managed through gritted teeth. "Men after me, dangerous." She ignored his warning and knelt beside him, setting the lantern on a rock. "I'm Madeline Farrow. My cabin is about 2 miles from here. I heard the shot earlier today." "Yates Galloway," he replied, his voice a rasp. "Best leave me, they'll kill you too." Madeline assessed his wound with practiced eyes. "This needs tending now, you've lost a lot of blood." When she reached toward his leg, Yates grabbed her wrist. "Don't touch it," he warned, his eyes intense despite his weakening state. She met his gaze unflinchingly. "You'll lose it if I don't." In that moment, looking into her determined face, Yates knew he had 2 choices: trust this stranger or die alone in the wilderness. He released her wrist. "Do what you must," he conceded. With surprising strength, Madeline helped him onto her horse. The journey to her cabin was a blur of pain for Yates, consciousness coming and going as they traveled through the darkness. Her cabin appeared as a small square of golden light in the vast blackness of the Montana night. Simple but sturdy, it stood in a clearing surrounded by pines, with a small corral where a few horses dozed. "My brother's away trapping," she explained as she helped him inside. "Been managing on my own for 3 weeks now." The cabin was warm, heated by a cast iron stove in one corner. A wooden table, 2 chairs, shelves lined with supplies, and a bed occupied most of the space. Herbs hung drying from the rafters, filling the air with an earthy scent. Madeline helped Yates onto the bed, then gathered supplies: clean cloths, a basin of water, whiskey, and what looked like a surgeon's kit. "You a doctor?" he asked, eyeing the instruments. "My father was. Taught me what he knew before the consumption took him 3 years ago." She cut away his blood-soaked pant leg. "This will hurt," Yates nodded, taking the bottle of whiskey she offered. After a long pull, he handed it back. "Do it." Madeline worked with quiet efficiency, cleaning around the wound first. "Bullet's still in there, need to get it out." "You've done this before." "Twice. Once for my brother, once for a trapper who got caught in his own trap." She met his eyes. "Both lived." That would have to be good enough, Yates thought as she handed him a leather strap to bite down on. The pain as she probed for the bullet was beyond anything he'd ever experienced. Blackness crept in from the edges of his vision, but he fought to stay conscious. Madeline's face remained focused, her hands steady as she worked. "Got it," she finally said, dropping a misshapen piece of lead into a metal dish. Yates spat out the leather strap. "Obliged. I'm not done yet. Need to clean it thoroughly. Infection's what kills most men, not the bullet." She poured whiskey directly into the wound. Yates couldn't hold back a shout of pain, his hands gripping the bed frame until his knuckles turned white. "Almost done," Madeline promised, now threading a needle. When she finished stitching and bandaging his leg, Yates was barely conscious. The last thing he remembered was her cool hand on his forehead and her voice steady and reassuring. "Rest now. You're safe here." Morning came with the smell of coffee and bacon. Yates opened his eyes to find Madeline tending the stove. She looked over when he stirred. "You made it through the night," she said, her tone matter of fact. "Fever broke about 2 hours ago." Yates tried to sit up and was immediately reminded of his injury. "Those men still out there. Haven't seen anyone. Checked at first light." She brought him a cup of coffee. Strong and black, figured that's how you'd take it. He accepted it gratefully. "You saved my life." "You're not out of the woods yet, Mr. Galloway. That leg needs time to heal." "Yates, Mr. Galloway was my father." He took a sip of the coffee. "Why'd you help me? Could have been anyone." "Outlaw, murderer." Madeline sat on the edge of a chair near the bed. "Out here, we help first and ask questions later. Besides, you don't have the look of a criminal about you." "What look is that?" "The mean kind. Your eyes are too honest." She stood abruptly, as if embarrassed by her observation. "You should eat something, need your strength." As days passed, Yates learned more about the woman who'd saved him. Madeline Farrow was 27, had come west with her father and brother after her mother died. Her father had been the only doctor for 50 miles before his death. Now she and her brother, James, ran a small horse breeding operation, supplying sturdy mounts to miners and settlers. "James should be back in a week," she told Yates on the third day as she changed his bandage. The wound was healing clean, no signs of infection. He went north to deliver horses to a new settlement. Yates watched her hands as she worked, capable, gentle when needed, but never hesitant. "You're not afraid living out here alone?" Madeline's eyes flicked up to meet his. "Should I be?" "Most women would be." "I'm not most women, Mr. Galloway." She tied off the fresh bandage. "I can shoot straight, ride hard, and set a broken bone. Fear's a luxury I can't afford." On the 5th day, Yates insisted on getting up. Using a makeshift crutch Madeline had fashioned from a sturdy branch, he made his way to the porch where she sat mending a shirt. "Beautiful land," he commented, looking out over the rolling hills that surrounded her homestead. "It is." Her needle moved steadily through the fabric. "What brought you to these parts?" Yates leaned against the porch rail. "Was a rancher down in Wyoming, lost everything in the drought 2 years back, been working odd jobs since, trying to save enough to start over. And the men who shot you," he sighed, "was working at a mine in Silver Creek. Found a rich vein, reported it to the foreman. Next thing I know, he's claiming I stole gold and set 3 men after me." Madeline's hands stilled. "The Silver Summit mine, you know it. Everyone around here does. Owned by Roland Blackstone, man's known for cheating his workers and worse." Yates nodded grimly. "That's the one. Guess I'm lucky they were poor shots." "Lucky I found you," she corrected. Their eyes met, and something passed between them, an understanding, perhaps, or the beginning of something more. That evening, as they sat by the fire after dinner, Yates asked about the book she kept beside her bed, a worn copy of Wuthering Heights. "My mother's," Madeline explained, her voice softening. "She taught me to read with it, said a woman needs stories to survive the frontier." "Would you read some?" Yates asked impulsively. "Been a long time since I heard a good story." Madeline looked surprised but reached for the book. As she read, her voice transformed, losing its practical edge and taking on a lyrical quality that filled the small cabin. Yates found himself watching her more than listening to the words, the way the firelight caught in her hair, the slight furrow between her brows as she concentrated, the graceful movement of her hands as she turned the pages. When she finally closed the book, the cabin seemed unnaturally quiet. "Thank you," Yates said softly. Madeline tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, suddenly self-conscious. "My pleasure." Their evening reading became a ritual. After the day's work and dinner, they would sit by the fire while Madeline read and Yates listened. Sometimes they would pause to discuss the story or share memories triggered by certain passages. In these quiet moments, the outside world with its dangers seemed very far away. By the 10th day, Yates was moving around with less pain, helping with small chores around the cabin. He split kindling while seated, fed the chickens that pecked around the yard, and even attempted to cook a meal that turned out barely edible, much to Madeline's poorly concealed amusement. Never claimed to be a chef, he defended himself as she scraped the burnt remains of what was supposed to be a rabbit stew into a bucket. Clearly, she laughed, the sound bright and unexpected in the small cabin. That night, as a storm raged outside, rattling the windows and sending gusts of wind down the chimney, Yates couldn't sleep. His leg ached, a dull throb that matched the thunder. He shifted in the bedroll Madeline had made for him near the stove, trying to find a comfortable position. Yates. Madeline's voice came softly from her bed in the corner. "Are you awake?" "Yes," he answered. "Legs bothering me some." He heard her rise, and then she was kneeling beside him with a small jar. "This might help. It's a salve I make with willow bark and other herbs." As she applied the salve to his leg, her touch sent a different kind of ache through him. He'd been trying to ignore his growing feelings for her, telling himself it was just gratitude or the intimacy of their situation. But in that moment, with her hands on his skin and her face close enough that he could count the freckles across her nose, he knew it was more. "Better?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Yates nodded, not trusting himself to speak. A particularly loud crash of thunder made Madeline jump slightly. Their eyes met in the dim light of the dying fire. "I should get back to bed," she said, but didn't move. Yates reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Thank you for everything." Madeline's eyes widened slightly, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned forward, her hand coming to rest on his chest. The kiss that followed was gentle, questioning, a moment suspended between heartbeats. When they separated, Madeline looked as surprised by her actions as Yates felt. "I'm sorry," she started, but Yates shook his head. "Don't be," he took her hand. "Unless you regret it, I don't." Her answer was immediate and certain. "But this is complicated," he finished for her. She nodded. "You'll be leaving once you're healed." The truth of her words hung between them. Yates had no home, no prospects. What could he offer someone like her? "I should get back to bed," she repeated, and this time she did move away, returning to her corner of the cabin. The next morning, an awkwardness had settled between them, neither mentioning what had happened in the night. Yates worried he had crossed a line, taking advantage of her kindness. As he sat on the porch later, watching Madeline tend to the horses in the corral, he struggled with his thoughts. He had nothing to his name except the clothes on his back and a reputation now tarnished by false accusations. She had a home, a livelihood, roots in this community. What right did he have to disrupt her life? His brooding was interrupted by the distant sound of hoofbeats. Madeline heard it too, her head snapping up from her work. "Get inside," she ordered, already moving toward the cabin. "Could be your friends from Silver Creek." Yates hobbled into the cabin as quickly as his injured leg would allow. Madeline followed, grabbing a Winchester rifle from above the door. "Stay away from the windows," she instructed, checking that the rifle was loaded. Yates reached for his revolver, which Madeline had cleaned and returned to him days earlier. "If it's them, I should be the one to face them." "This is my home," she countered. "No one threatens anyone under my roof." The riders, 3 of them, appeared at the edge of the clearing. Yates recognized them immediately, Blackstone's men led by a brutal foreman named Jenkins. "That's them," he confirmed grimly. Madeline took position by a window, rifle ready. "What do they want?" "To silence me. I'm the only one who knows they've been skimming gold from the mine, reporting false amounts to the owner." Jenkins's voice carried across the yard. "We know you're in there, Galloway. Come out and face justice." Madeline's jaw tightened. "Justice? Is that what they call murder these days?" "Let me handle this," Yates insisted. "They'll burn this place down with both of us inside if they have to." Before she could stop him, he limped to the door and called out, "I'm coming out, don't shoot." Yates, "No." Madeline hissed, but he was already opening the door. He stepped onto the porch, revolver held loosely at his side, making no threatening moves. Jenkins and his men sat on their horses 20 yards away, rifles trained on him. "There's the thief," Jenkins sneered. "Thought you'd crawl away and die, did you?" "I didn't steal anything, Jenkins. We both know what this is really about." Jenkins's eyes narrowed. "Don't know what you're talking about, but Mr. Blackstone wants his gold back." "There is no gold, just your lies to cover your own stealing." Yates took a painful step forward. "How much have you three taken over the past year? Enough to hang for, I'd wager." One of the other men shifted nervously. "Jenkins, what's he talking about? He's lying to save his skin," Jenkins snapped. "Shoot him and let's be done with it." The cabin door opened wider and Madeline stepped out, Winchester aimed steadily at Jenkins. "3 against 1 injured man. That seem fair to you gentlemen?" Jenkins laughed. "Stay out of this, woman, unless you want to join him." "This is my land," Madeline stated firmly. "And you're trespassing." The standoff might have ended in bloodshed if not for the sound of more horses approaching from the north. A group of 5 riders appeared. James Farrow had returned from his trip, accompanied by several other men. Seeing the newcomers, Jenkins hesitated. "This isn't over, Galloway," he threatened before wheeling his horse around. The 3 men galloped away, disappearing into the trees as quickly as they had come. James Farrow, a broad-shouldered man with the same wheat-colored hair as his sister, dismounted quickly. "Maddie, are you all right?" "Who were those men?" As Madeline explained the situation, Yates leaned heavily against the porch rail, the adrenaline that had kept him standing now fading. His leg throbbed mercilessly. James turned his attention to Yates, sizing him up with a careful eye. "So you're the cowboy my sister's been nursing back to health." "James," Madeline warned. Her brother raised his hands in a placating gesture. "Just making conversation, Maddie." To Yates he said, "Seems you've brought trouble to our door." "Not by choice," Yates replied. "I'm grateful to your sister. She saved my life." "And I'd do it again," Madeline stated firmly, moving to support Yates as he swayed slightly. "Help me get him back inside." His legs still healing. With James's assistance, Yates made it back to the bed. Madeline examined his leg, concerned that the confrontation had set back his recovery. "You shouldn't have gone out there," she scolded as she rewrapped the bandage. "Couldn't let you face them alone," Yates replied quietly. James watched their interaction with interest. After Madeline finished, he asked to speak with her outside. Through the partially open door, Yates could hear their muted conversation. "What exactly is going on here, Maddie?" James asked. "I found him shot and dying. What would you have had me do?" "Of course you had to help him." "But the way you look at him—" "I don't know what you mean," Madeline interrupted. "Yes, you do." James's voice softened. "I haven't seen that look since Thomas." At the mention of that name, Yates felt a pang of jealousy, followed immediately by shame. He had no claim on Madeline, no right to feel anything about her past. The conversation outside continued, but Yates couldn't make out the words. When Madeline returned, her expression was guarded. "Your brother doesn't trust me," Yates observed. "James is protective. Has been since our parents died." She busied herself with organizing her medical supplies. "He'll come around once he knows you better." "And who was Thomas?" The question slipped out before Yates could stop it. Madeline's hands stilled. "You were listening." "Not intentionally." "Just heard the name." She was quiet for so long that Yates thought she wouldn't answer. Finally, she said, "He was my fiancé, died in a mining accident 2 years ago." "I'm sorry," she nodded, accepting his sympathy. "It was hard. For a long time after, I thought that part of my life was over. That I'd never," she broke off, shaking her head. "It doesn't matter now." "It matters," Yates said gently. "Everything that's shaped you matters." Their eyes met across the small space, and the connection that had been growing between them seemed to strengthen. But before either could speak, James entered the cabin. "Those men might come back," he said without preamble. "With reinforcements," Yates nodded. "Likely they have too much to lose if the truth gets out." "What truth exactly?" James asked, settling into a chair. Yates explained about the gold skimming at the Silver Summit mine, how he'd discovered discrepancies in the records, and how Jenkins and his cronies had framed him to protect themselves. "So it's your word against theirs," James concluded. "Not exactly. I managed to take some of the doctored ledgers before I ran. Had them in my saddlebags." Madeline looked up sharply. "The horse that bolted when you were shot," Yates nodded grimly. "If they found those ledgers, they've destroyed them by now, or maybe not," James mused. "Horse could have run anywhere. Might be worth looking." The next morning, James and 2 of his friends set out to search for Yates's horse while Madeline stayed behind with Yates. The tension from the previous day had eased somewhat, but there was still an unspoken heaviness between them. As Madeline helped Yates exercise his leg, walking slowly around the cabin clearing, he broached the subject that had been weighing on him. "I've been thinking about what happens next," he began. Madeline kept her eyes on the path ahead. "Your leg's healing well. Another week or two and you'll be able to ride again." "That's not what I meant." Yates stopped, turning to face her. "Madeline, I can't stay here forever." "I know that." Her voice was carefully neutral, "but I don't want to leave." The admission hung in the air between them. "These past weeks, despite everything, the pain, the danger they've been, I've felt more at home here than anywhere since I lost my ranch." Madeline finally met his eyes. "What are you saying, Yates?" "I'm saying I care for you, more than I thought possible in such a short time. And if there's any chance you might feel something similar, I do," she interrupted, her composure cracking slightly. "But feelings aren't enough. You have no home, no prospects. Those men want you dead. What kind of future could we possibly have?" Her practical assessment stung, but Yates couldn't argue with it. "I could find work, start over. I'm not afraid of hard labor. Around here, where Jenkins and his men could find you any day." She shook her head. "It's too dangerous." Before Yates could respond, a shout came from the direction of the trail. James was returning, and he wasn't alone. Beside him trotted a familiar bay gelding Yates's horse. "Found him about 5 miles northeast," James announced triumphantly as he rode into the yard. Saddlebags still intact. The ledgers were indeed still in the saddlebags, wrapped in oilskin to protect them from the elements. Yates spread them on the cabin table, showing James and Madeline the evidence of the foreman's theft. "With these, we can go to the sheriff," James said, examining the careful documentation of missing gold. "The sheriff in Silver Creek is in Blackstone's pocket," Yates warned. "Then we go to Helena," Madeline suggested. "The territorial marshal there is honest. My father treated his wife years ago." It was decided that James would take the ledgers to Helena the next day, a journey that would take him at least 4 days round trip. In the meantime, they would keep watch in case Jenkins returned. That night, after James had gone to his smaller cabin behind the main house, Madeline and Yates sat by the fire as had become their custom. But instead of reading, they talked about possibilities. "If the marshal believes the evidence," Madeline said, poking at the fire, "what will you do then?" Yates considered the question. "Depends on what happens to Blackstone, I suppose. If he's honest and was being deceived too, he might need a new foreman." "You'd go back there, after everything?" "I need to start somewhere." He reached for her hand. "Madeline, I meant what I said earlier. I care for you deeply, but I won't ask you to take a chance on a man with nothing to his name." She squeezed his hand. "You think that's what matters to me, your prospects? It should. You've built something here. You have security, independence. And loneliness," she added quietly. "Yes, I have this cabin, this land, but after Thomas died, I never thought I'd find someone who made me feel alive again." She looked up at him. "Until you." The hope that surged through Yates nearly took his breath away. "Are you saying?" "I'm saying I'm willing to see where this leads." Madeline moved closer to him on the bench. "If you are." Their kiss this time was not hesitant but certain, a promise exchanged without words. When they parted, Yates held her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, memorizing the moment. "Whatever happens," he murmured, "we face it together." The next morning, James departed for Helena with the ledgers. Yates and Madeline settled into a watchful routine, always aware that Jenkins and his men might return. Yates continued to grow stronger, now able to walk without the crutch for short distances. They used the time to learn more about each other. Yates spoke of his childhood in Texas, his dreams for his Wyoming ranch before the drought took it all, the wandering years that followed. Madeline shared stories of learning medicine from her father, the challenges of being a woman trying to maintain respect in the frontier, her hopes to someday open a proper infirmary in the growing settlement 10 miles east. On the second night after James left, Yates woke to the sound of breaking glass. Someone had thrown a rock through the cabin window. He was on his feet instantly, reaching for his gun. "Madeline, wake up," he hissed. "Someone's outside." She was alert immediately, grabbing her rifle from beside the bed. "How many?" "Can't tell." Yates moved cautiously to the window, keeping to the shadows. He could make out at least 3 figures moving in the darkness. "It's them," a voice called out. "Time's up, Galloway." "Come out now or we burn this place to the ground." Madeline's face hardened. "Jenkins, you need to run," Yates told her. "Take the back door, get to the settlement, I'll hold them off." "I'm not leaving you," she insisted. "This is my fight, not yours." Her eyes flashed in the dim light. "It became my fight the moment I found you bleeding by that stream. We stand together, remember?" Before Yates could argue further, the smell of smoke reached them. They looked out to see flames licking at the corner of the cabin where Jenkins had thrown a burning torch. "The horses," Madeline gasped. "If they're setting fires," she was right. The nearby stable was vulnerable and the horses inside would be trapped if it caught fire. They needed to act quickly. "I'll create a distraction," Yates decided. "Draw their attention to the front. You slip out the back and get to the horses." Madeline nodded reluctantly. "Be careful, always am." He gave her a quick kiss before moving to the front door. Ready, at her nod, Yates flung open the door and fired 2 shots into the air. "Jenkins, I'm here, let's settle this man to man." As Jenkins and his men turned their attention to Yates, Madeline slipped out the back door, keeping low and using the darkness for cover as she made her way to the stable. Jenkins laughed, a harsh sound in the night. "Look at you, barely standing. What kind of fight do you think you can put up?" "Enough of one," Yates replied, stepping fully onto the porch despite the pain in his leg. "I know what you've been doing at the mine, stealing from Blackstone, falsifying records." "Prove it," Jenkins sneered. "The ledgers are already on their way to the territorial marshal in Helena," Yates informed him, taking satisfaction in the way Jenkins's expression changed. "It's over." One of the other men shifted nervously. "Jenkins, if the marshal has evidence, shut up," Jenkins snapped. "He's bluffing." "Am I? Why risk it? You 3 could be halfway to California by morning, or you can try to kill me and hang for it when the marshal arrives." The uncertainty had spread to all 3 men now. Yates pressed his advantage. "Blackstone won't protect you. He's losing thousands to your scheme. He'll want your hides more than mine." While Yates kept them talking, Madeline had reached the stable and was leading the horses out the back, away from the burning cabin. She would need to circle around to reach Yates without being seen. Jenkins seemed to make a decision. "Enough talk. You're coming with us to Helena. If there really are ledgers, we'll deal with them there." "I'm not going anywhere with you," Yates stated firmly. "Then you die here." Jenkins raised his rifle. A shot rang out, but it wasn't from Jenkins's gun. The man to his right cried out and fell from his horse, clutching his shoulder. James Farrow emerged from the trees, rifle aimed steadily at Jenkins. "Next one goes between your eyes," James warned. The distraction gave Madeline the opportunity to reach Yates's side, leading both their horses. "We need to go," she urged. "The cabin's too far gone." She was right. The fire had spread quickly along the dry timber walls. The home she had built with her father and brother was being consumed before their eyes. Jenkins, seeing his advantage slipping away, made a desperate move. He fired at James, forcing him to dive for cover, then turned his gun toward Yates and Madeline. Yates reacted instinctively, pushing Madeline behind him as he fired. His shot caught Jenkins in the chest, sending him tumbling from his horse. The third man, seeing his companions fallen, turned and fled into the night. "James," Madeline called out. "Are you hit?" "I'm fine," her brother answered, emerging from behind a tree. "But we need to get clear of the fire. It could spread to the woods." They mounted quickly, Yates wincing as he swung his injured leg over the saddle. As they rode away from the burning cabin, Madeline looked back one last time at the home that had sheltered her family for years. "Everything I have is in there," she said, her voice hollow. Yates reached across the space between their horses to take her hand. "Not everything." They rode through the night to the nearest settlement, a growing town called Riverside where James had friends. By dawn, word of the confrontation had spread, and a group of men had ridden out to handle the aftermath at the Farrow homestead. The wounded man had been brought in for treatment and arrest, while Jenkins's body was recovered for burial. The cabin was a complete loss, but the stable and corral had been saved, along with all the horses, the foundation of the Farrows' livelihood. The territorial marshal arrived from Helena 3 days later, having already been on his way after receiving James and the ledgers. He took statements from Yates, Madeline, and James, as well as from the captured man who, facing hanging, had confessed to everything. Blackstone himself is under investigation now, the marshal informed them as they sat in Riverside's small hotel. Seems he might have known more than he let on. Either way, your name is cleared, Galloway. Relief washed over Yates. What about the man who got away? We'll find him. Men like that always turn up eventually. The marshal gathered his notes. I'll need you to testify when the time comes, but that won't be for a while yet. After he left, Madeline, Yates, and James discussed their next steps. We still have the horses, James pointed out. We can rebuild the cabin, maybe even expand. It'll take time, Madeline said, and money. Yates had been quiet, thinking. Now he spoke up. I might have a solution if you're willing to hear it. They both looked at him expectantly. Blackstone's mine will need new management. With my experience and what I know about the operation, I might be able to convince the territorial authorities to let me run it until everything's sorted out. He looked directly at Madeline. It would mean a steady income, enough to rebuild and more. You'd go back there, after everything? She asked, echoing her question from days earlier. Not alone, Yates answered. Only if you'd come with me as my wife. The proposal hung in the air, unexpected yet somehow inevitable. James cleared his throat awkwardly. I'll just check on the horses, he muttered, making a hasty exit. Alone now, Madeline studied Yates's face. Are you certain? We've known each other such a short time. I've never been more certain of anything. Yates took both her hands in his. When I was shot, I thought I'd die alone in those mountains. Instead, I found you stubborn, brave, beautiful you. You didn't just save my leg that day. You saved me. Tears filled Madeline's eyes, but she was smiling. You saved me too. I was existing, not living, going through the motions day after day. Is that a yes? Yates asked, his heart pounding. In answer, Madeline leaned forward and kissed him, a kiss full of promise and future. Yes, she whispered against his lips. Yes, I'll marry you. They were wed 2 weeks later in Riverside's small church. James stood as witness, having given his blessing after seeing how genuinely Yates cared for his sister. Madeline wore a simple blue dress borrowed from the shopkeeper's wife, with wildflowers in her hair. Yates, now walking with only a slight limp, had managed to acquire a proper suit for the occasion. As they exchanged vows, Yates marveled at how drastically his life had changed in just 1 month. From a lonely drifter with a bullet in his leg to a husband with prospects and purpose, all because Madeline had refused to leave him to his fate. The territorial authorities did indeed grant Yates temporary management of the Silver Summit mine, with the understanding that he would implement honest practices and possibly purchase the operation when Blackstone's legal troubles concluded. James decided to expand their horse breeding business, using some of the rebuilt cabin's land as his base while establishing a proper stable in Riverside. Over the next year, Yates and Madeline divided their time between the mine and the rebuilt cabin, which was now larger and more comfortable than before. The mining community, once suspicious of the new manager and his medically trained wife, soon came to appreciate both Yates for his fair treatment of the workers, and Madeline for the small infirmary she established to treat injuries and illnesses. When the opportunity came to purchase the mine outright, Yates and Madeline decided instead to sell their stake in the operation and invest in expanding the infirmary into a proper small hospital for the growing region. It was a decision that aligned with both their dreams, Madeline's to use her medical knowledge to help others, and Yates's to build something lasting with the woman he loved. On the anniversary of the day Madeline had found Yates bleeding by the stream, they sat on the porch of their cabin, watching the sunset paint the Montana sky in brilliant golds and purples. Madeline's hand rested on her growing belly, their first child due in 3 months' time. Do you ever think about how differently things might have turned out? She asked, leaning against his shoulder. If I hadn't heard that gunshot, or if I'd decided not to investigate, Yates covered her hand with his, feeling the slight movement of their child beneath. I try not to. Some things are too painful to contemplate, like losing your leg, she teased. That too, he smiled, remembering their first exchange. You were so certain I'd lose it if you didn't help. I was right, wasn't I? Madeline's eyes sparkled with mischief. About that and many other things. Most things, he conceded. Though not about me leaving once I was healed. She turned her face up to his. That's the one time I'm glad to have been wrong. Yates kissed her softly, still marveling at how this strong, remarkable woman had chosen to share her life with him. Me too, love, me too. As darkness settled over the land, they remained on the porch, talking of the future, the child soon to join them, the hospital taking shape in Riverside, James's upcoming wedding to the schoolteacher he'd been courting. Life stretched before them, full of possibility and promise. Later that night, as Madeline slept peacefully beside him, Yates reflected on the journey that had brought him here. A bullet meant to end his life had instead given him everything he'd ever wanted: a home, a purpose, a family. And it had all begun with a stubborn woman who refused to let him die alone in the wilderness. The leg that had once nearly cost him his life now bore only a scar, a reminder of how close he had come to losing everything before he'd even found it. Yates placed his hand gently on Madeline's rounded belly, feeling their child shift beneath his palm, and whispered a promise to them both. "I'll never waste this second chance," he vowed. "Not a single day." Madeline stirred, her eyes opening sleepily. "What are you thinking about so seriously in the middle of the night?" "Just counting my blessings," he replied, drawing her closer. She smiled, nestling against him. "We have many. Starting with a bull-headed woman who wouldn't listen when a fool of a cowboy told her not to touch his leg." Madeline laughed softly. "Good thing I never was one for taking orders." "Good thing indeed," Yates agreed, kissing her forehead as she drifted back to sleep. Outside, the Montana night wrapped around their cabin like a protective cloak, stars scattered across the vast expanse of sky. The same stars that had witnessed their beginning now shone down on their continuing story, a story of love found in the most unlikely circumstances, of healing that went far deeper than flesh and bone, of a future built together from the broken pieces of separate pasts. And as the years passed, the legend grew in those parts of a stubborn cowboy and the even more stubborn woman who saved him not just his leg, but his heart and soul as well. Their children and grandchildren would retell the story, sometimes embellishing details, but always emphasizing the moment that changed everything. When a cowboy who'd been shot in the leg said, "Don't touch it," and she said, "You'll lose it if I don't." In that moment of trust and surrender, of expertise and compassion, a love had begun that would endure far beyond the wild days of the Montana Territory, becoming part of the very foundation of the community they helped build. A testament to the fact that sometimes the greatest journeys begin with a single step, or in their case, with a bullet, a stream, and a chance encounter that changed everything.